The first contraction hit Elara like a thunderbolt from a clear sky. She was standing in the garden, surrounded by the impossible roses that had bloomed in the dead of winter, flowers that shouldn't exist, petals of crystalline ice and veins of liquid gold, growing from soil that had been frozen solid for 5,000 years. The roses had started appearing 3 months ago, right after her belly had grown large enough that she could no longer see her own feet. Soren said they were a manifestation of the triplets' combined magic. 3 hybrid children, each carrying a fragment of their father's power, reaching out into the world before they were even born, reshaping reality simply by existing. Elara had thought it was beautiful. Now, as agony ripped through her abdomen and she collapsed to her knees among the golden petals, she thought it was terrifying. Something's wrong. The thought cut through the pain like a blade. This wasn't how Soren had described labor. This wasn't the gradual building of pressure, the slow, rhythmic waves that would give her time to prepare. This was violence. This was war. This was 3 ancient powers waking up inside her body and demanding to be born. She opened her mouth to scream, but no sound came out. The golden light beneath her skin flared so bright it turned the garden into a sun. The roses around her shattered, unable to withstand the surge of power. And then the world went dark. Kaelan felt it first. He was in the war room, reviewing the latest reports from the border scouts. The Ember King had been quiet since the Coalition's retreat 6 months ago, but quiet didn't mean defeated. It meant planning. It meant waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The bond in his chest lurched. Not the gentle pulse of connection he'd grown accustomed to. Not the warm thread that let him feel Elara's emotions, her heartbeat, her breath. This was a scream. The maps scattered as Kaelan vaulted over the table. He didn't bother with doors. Ice exploded outward as he carved his own path through the stone walls, following the bond like a beacon. Garden. She's in the garden. Something's wrong. He burst through the eastern wall and found her. Elara was on her knees among the shattered roses. Her silver-streaked hair floated around her head like a halo of starlight. Her eyes were open but unseeing, rolled back to show only white, and the golden light pouring from her skin was so intense that Kaelan had to shield his face. But that wasn't what stopped his heart. It was the blood. Rivers of it, soaking through her white dress, pooling in the frozen soil beneath her. More blood than a human body should be able to hold. More blood than anyone could lose and survive. Elara. He lunged forward, but the light pushed him back. A wall of pure golden energy, protecting her, keeping him out. No. No. The bond was screaming. Not just Elara's pain, but the triplets, too. 3 separate voices wailing in terror, in confusion, in desperate need. They were coming. All 3 of them. Right now, and they were tearing their mother apart to do it. Theron arrived 30 seconds later, having shifted into wolf form and back so fast that smoke still rose from his skin. Soren was right behind him, his arms full of medical supplies and diagnostic crystals that he dropped the moment he saw the scene. "What's happening?" Theron roared. "Why is there so much blood?" "The barrier," Soren gasped. He was already running calculations, his storm-gray eyes flickering with magical sight. The children's power is manifesting. They're creating a protective cocoon, but their magic is raw, uncontrolled. They don't understand that they're hurting her. Then make them understand. Kaelan's voice cracked with desperation. He slammed his fists against the golden barrier, and ice erupted from the impact point, only to melt instantly against the heat of the children's power. "They're infants," Soren said. His voice was hollow. "They don't have consciousness yet. They're operating on pure instinct. Protect Mother. Be born. Survive. They can't comprehend that their protection is killing her." Theron shifted. Not into his wolf form, but into something between. His bones cracked and reformed, muscles swelling, claws extending. The hybrid form that Titans only used in the most desperate battles. "Then I'll break through." He threw himself at the barrier with the full force of his battle form. The impact shook the citadel to its foundations. Cracks spiderwebbed across the courtyard stones. The barrier didn't even flicker. Again, Theron snarled. He struck again, and again, and again. Each blow strong enough to shatter castle walls, each blow absorbed by the golden light as if it were nothing. Inside the cocoon, Elara convulsed. More blood gushed from between her legs. Her heartbeat, transmitted through the bond, was growing weaker, fainter, slower. She's dying. Kaelan said it like a fact, like reading a report about someone else's tragedy. Because if he let himself feel it, if he let himself understand that his mate, his queen, the woman who had broken the eternal winter and saved their souls, was bleeding out 10 feet away and he couldn't reach her, he would shatter. And shattered kings couldn't save anyone. There has to be a way, he said. His voice was winter itself, cold and absolute. Soren, think. You've spent 6 months studying hybrid births. You've read every text in every archive. There has to be something we haven't tried. Soren's hands were shaking as he gathered his scattered crystals. His mind was racing through 5 millennia of accumulated knowledge, searching for anything that might help. The barrier is made of the children's magic, he said slowly. It responds to their instincts. Fear creates protection. Pain creates isolation. We can't break through because they perceive us as threats. We're their fathers, Theron growled. His hybrid form was bleeding from a dozen self-inflicted wounds where he'd torn at his own flesh in frustration. How can we be threats? We're not human. Soren's eyes widened as understanding crashed over him. We're not human. The children are hybrids. Half Titan, half human. Their instincts are pulling from both sides of their nature. The Titan half recognizes us as pack, as family, but the human half sees us as monsters. Kaelan finished the thought. His voice was barely a whisper. They're protecting her from us. The silence that followed was devastating. 3 ancient Titans stood helpless before a barrier made of their own children's fear. Unable to reach the woman they loved, unable to stop her death, because their children thought they were the enemy. Then we need a human. Theron's voice was rough with desperation. Someone the human half will recognize as safe. Someone who can get through the barrier and help her. There are no humans in the Citadel, Soren said. We evacuated them all during the siege. The nearest village is Lyra. Kaelan's head snapped up. Elara's sister. She's in the valley. She's human. And the children would have felt her presence through the bond. They know she's family. She's also terrified of us, Soren pointed out. She hasn't visited since Elara's transformation. She thinks we've corrupted her sister. I don't care if she thinks we're the demons of the underworld, Theron snarled. He was already shifting back to full wolf form. I'll drag her here by the throat if I have to. He vanished into the blizzard before anyone could respond. Soren turned to Kaelan. His expression was grim. Even if Theron brings Lyra back in time, there's no guarantee this will work. The children might not recognize her. The barrier might reject her too, and even if she gets through, she's not a healer. She won't know how to. Then, you'll guide her. Kaelan's eyes were locked on Elara's convulsing form, on the light that was flickering now, growing unstable as her life force faded. Through the bond. I'll hold the connection open. You'll speak through me, and Lyra will do exactly what you tell her. We will not let her die, Soren. I refuse to allow it. Soren looked at his king, at the frost crawling up Kaelan's arms, the ice forming in his hair, the way his entire body was trembling with the effort of holding himself together. In 5,000 years, he had never seen Kaelan afraid. Until now. Understood, Soren said quietly. I'll prepare the instructions. Theron found Lyra in the village bakery. She was covered in flour, her brown hair tied back in a messy bun, her hands deep in bread dough. When the door exploded inward and a wolf the size of a horse burst through, she screamed. The other villagers scattered. Tables overturned. Bread loaves flew through the air, but Theron didn't care about them. He shifted mid-stride, bones cracking and reforming, until he stood before Lyra in his human form. Naked, covered in blood, his orange eyes blazing with desperation. Your sister is dying. Lyra's scream cut off. Her face went white. What? The children are coming. Something's wrong. She's bleeding out and we can't reach her. We need you. I can't. Theron grabbed her arm. Not gently. There was no time for gentle. You can. You will. Because if you don't, Elara dies. Your sister. The girl who took your place on that mountain. Who walked into the snow so you wouldn't have to. She is dying right now, and you are the only one who can save her. Lyra stared at him. At this monster from the peak. This beast that her village had sacrificed her sister to. And saw the tears streaming down his face. Titans didn't cry. Everyone knew that. They were creatures of ice and fire and ancient power, incapable of human emotion. But this one was weeping. For her sister. Take me to her, Lyra whispered. Theron shifted. Lyra barely had time to grab his fur before he was running, faster than any horse, faster than the wind itself, carrying her up the mountain toward the citadel, toward Elara, toward the impossible choice that would change everything. The barrier was failing when they arrived, not because the children's power was weakening, because Elara's was. The golden light flickered and stuttered, responding to the fading heartbeat of the woman at its center. Lyra stumbled as Theron deposited her in the garden. She took in the scene with wide, terrified eyes. The shattered roses, the pools of blood, the two massive titans standing helpless before a wall of light. And her sister. Elara looked like a fallen angel. Her silver-streaked hair spread across the frozen ground, her white dress soaked crimson, her skin so pale it was almost translucent, the golden veins beneath pulsing weakly. She was beautiful. She was dying. The barrier, Kaelan said. His voice was hoarse. You need to walk through it. The children might let you pass. Might? Lyra's voice cracked. We don't know, Soren admitted. He was clutching a diagnostic crystal so hard it was cutting into his palm. But it's the only chance we have. Please try. Lyra looked at the golden wall of light, at the power radiating from it. Power that had pushed back 3 titans. Power that could probably vaporize a human with a thought. She took a step forward. The light flared. Lyra flinched, raising her arms to shield her face. But the expected pain didn't come. Instead, she felt warmth, recognition, like being embraced by something that had known her all along. Aunt, a voice whispered in her mind. 3 voices, actually, overlapping and harmonizing. Family, safe. Help Mother, please help Mother. Lyra's breath caught. The barrier parted around her like water. She was through. She's in, Soren breathed. It worked. The human recognition, it worked. Now guide her, Kaelan said. He closed his eyes, reaching through the bond, opening himself as a conduit between Soren's knowledge and Lyra's hands. Lyra knelt beside her sister. Elara's eyes were still rolled back, her body still convulsing, but her lips were moving, forming words that no one could hear. The children, they're tangled. Lyra heard Soren's voice in her head, transmitted through some magical connection she didn't understand. Their umbilical cords are wrapped around each other. They're trying to be born at the same time, but they're blocking each other. You need to reach in and guide them. Reach in? Lyra's hands trembled. I'm not a midwife. I'm a baker. I make bread. You're her sister. Soren's voice was gentle but firm. You're the only one who can touch her right now. I'll tell you exactly what to do. Trust me. Trust yourself. Lyra looked at Elara's face. At the sister who had always protected her. Who had taken her place in the sacrifice. Who had walked into death so Lyra could live. It was time to return the favor. Tell me what to do, she said. The next hour was the longest of Lyra's life. Soren's instructions came in a steady stream, translated through Kaelan's bond. Turn her on her side. Apply pressure here. Feel for the first cord. Gently, gently. Unwrap it from the second. Don't pull. Guide. Let the children do the work. Lyra's hands were covered in her sister's blood. Her arms ached from holding positions that Soren needed. Her eyes burned from tears she couldn't take the time to wipe away. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. Because every time she wavered, Every time the horror of what she was doing threatened to overwhelm her, she felt those 3 little voices in her mind. Please, please help Mother. We didn't mean to hurt her. We didn't know. Please. They were so small, so scared, powerful enough to hold off titans, but still just babies, still just children who had accidentally hurt the person they loved most. It's okay, Lyra thought back at them. I'm helping her. You need to help too. One at a time. Can you do that? Can you come out one at a time instead of all together? A pause. A hesitation. Then, slowly, she felt one of the presences pull back, making room. The first child slid into her hands a moment later. Lyra gasped. The baby was tiny but perfect. A girl with wisps of silver hair and eyes that flickered between blue and gold. She didn't cry. She just looked up at Lyra with an ancient, knowing gaze that made the baker's daughter want to weep. First one's out, Lyra said. Her voice was shaking. She's beautiful. Give her to Elara. Soren's voice was urgent. Skin-to-skin contact. The children need to bond with their mother or their magic will destabilize. Lyra placed the baby girl on Elara's chest. The golden light flared, but this time it was warm. Healing. The bleeding slowed. Good. Now the second. The second child was a boy, larger than his sister, with dark hair and eyes that burned like embers. He came easier, now that his siblings had learned to take turns. Lyra placed him beside his sister on Elara's chest. The bleeding stopped entirely. One more, Soren said. You're doing wonderfully, Lyra. One more and she'll be safe. The third child didn't want to come. Lyra felt it, a stubborn presence, clinging to the warmth of the womb, terrified of the cold world outside. It's okay, she thought at it. Your family is waiting. Your mother is waiting. She needs you to be brave, scared. The tiny voice whispered. World is big. World is loud. Want to stay safe. Lyra understood. Gods, did she understand. She had felt the same way her entire life, hiding in the village, hiding behind her sister, terrified of everything beyond the boundaries of what she knew. But Elara had taught her something. Sometimes the scariest thing and the right thing were the same. I was scared too, Lyra thought. When your mother walked up that mountain, I was terrified. I thought I'd never see her again. But she was brave. She faced the monsters. And look what happened. She found love. She found family. She found you. The world is scary. But it's also beautiful. And your mother is out here, waiting to hold you. Don't you want to meet her? A long pause. Then, slowly, Lyra felt the third child let go. The last baby was another girl. The smallest of the 3, with hair that shifted between silver and gold like sunlight on snow. Her eyes were closed, and for one terrible moment, Lyra thought she wasn't breathing. Then the baby sneezed. A tiny, perfect sneeze that expelled a puff of golden light, and started crying. The wail broke the silence of the garden like a bell. The barrier dissolved. The 3 titans rushed forward, surrounding Elara and the babies in a protective circle. Elara's eyes fluttered open. She looked up at the 3 massive figures looming over her, at the sister kneeling at her side, covered in blood and tears, at the 3 tiny bundles on her chest, squirming and crying and impossibly, miraculously alive. Her voice was a croak. Did we do it? You did it, Kaelan breathed. He was on his knees beside her, his hand hovering over the babies as if afraid to touch them. You brought them into the world. All 3 of them. They're perfect, Elara. They're perfect. 3. Elara repeated. Her smile was weak but radiant. We're going to need a bigger nest. Theron made a sound that was half laugh, half sob. Soren was already scanning the babies with his diagnostic magic, his hands trembling as he catalogued their vital signs. And Lyra sat back on her heels, her blood-soaked hands falling to her sides, and finally let herself cry. The children were named at sunset. It was tradition, Soren explained. Titan children received their names when the first light of their birthday faded. When they stood at the threshold between day and night, between one world and the next. Elara lay in the nest, propped up against a mountain of pillows, the 3 babies cradled in her arms. She was still pale, still weak from the blood loss, but the golden light beneath her skin had stabilized. The children's magic was no longer draining her. It was sustaining her. They were connected now, 4 hearts beating as one. The first child, Kaelan said. He stood at the head of the nest, his winter blue eyes soft as he looked at the silver-haired girl. She came first. She led her siblings into the world. She should carry the name of a leader. Aurora, Elara said softly. Like the dawn. The light that comes before the sun, Kaelan nodded. Aurora of the Winter Citadel. First daughter of the bond. The second child, Theron continued. He was kneeling at the foot of the nest, his orange eyes bright with tears he refused to let fall. Strong, stubborn, a fighter from his first breath. He has your eyes, Elara said, looking at the dark-haired boy who was currently trying to eat his own fist. Your fire, Theron's voice cracked. Kaedan. It means warrior. Kaedan of the Winter Citadel, Elara agreed. First son of the bond, and the third, Soren finished. He sat at Elara's side, one hand resting on the smallest baby's back, the last to come, the most reluctant, but perhaps the bravest, for facing her fear in the end. Elara looked at the golden silver-haired girl, at the tiny face that still held traces of the terror she'd felt in the womb. Nova, she whispered. A new star. Small, but burning bright. Nova of the Winter Citadel, Soren said. Second daughter of the bond. Aurora. Kaelan. Nova. 3 names for 3 impossible children. 3 heirs who would change the world. Elara looked up at her mates, at the love and fear and hope written across their ancient faces. Our family, she said. Our pack. Our future. The 3 titans leaned in as one. Kaelan pressed his lips to her forehead. Theron kissed her cheek. Soren brushed his mouth against her temple, and the 3 babies cooed, their golden magic flaring in harmony, reaching out to touch the bonds that connected them all. Outside, the sun slipped below the horizon, and in the Winter Citadel, surrounded by those who loved her, Elara closed her eyes. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The Ember King was still out there. The other courts would learn of the triplets soon. The world would demand answers, explanations, proof that these hybrid children weren't the monsters the prophecies had warned of. But tonight, there was only this: peace, love, family, the blood of stars flowing through the veins of 3 tiny miracles, and a mother who would burn down heaven itself to protect them. Part 13. The Reckoning. 3 months passed. The triplets grew at an impossible rate. Not the slow, fragile development of human infants, but the accelerated growth of Titan offspring, compressed into a body that was neither fully one nor the other. At 1 month, they could hold their heads up and track movement with their strange, color-shifting eyes. At 2 months, they were crawling. Not the awkward shuffle of normal babies, but a coordinated prowl that reminded Elara uncomfortably of wolf cubs learning to hunt. At 3 months, they were attempting to walk, and their magic was manifesting. Aurora, the firstborn, had inherited Kaelan's affinity for ice. She could freeze her milk solid with a thought when she didn't want to eat. She created snowflakes when she was happy, blizzards when she was upset. Kaedan, the only boy, had Theron's fire. His tantrums literally caused spontaneous combustion. They'd already had to replace his cradle twice. And Nova, the youngest, had developed something none of them expected. She could disappear. The first time it happened, Elara had a heart attack. She'd put Nova down for a nap, turned around to grab a fresh blanket, and when she looked back, the cradle was empty. No baby, no trace, just rumpled sheets and the fading scent of milk and starlight. Kaelan! Her scream had brought all 3 titans running. They'd torn the citadel apart, searching for their youngest daughter. Theron had nearly shifted and killed 2 guards who couldn't tell him where the baby had gone. They found her 3 hours later, in the treasury vault, surrounded by gold coins, happily gumming on a ruby the size of her fist, completely unharmed and utterly confused about why everyone was so upset. She can teleport, Soren had said, his voice caught somewhere between awe and horror. At 3 months old, she can teleport. From that day on, Nova was never left alone. Someone was always watching her, usually Lyra, who had moved into the citadel after the birth and discovered she had a gift for anticipating which impossible thing the babies would do next. She thinks in pictures, Lyra explained one evening, bouncing Nova on her knee while the baby tried to grab at the shiny buttons on her dress. I can feel it through the bond you gave me. She sees where she wants to be, and then she's just there. Can you stop her? Elara asked. She was nursing Kaelan, who was generating enough heat that she'd had to wrap him in flame-resistant cloth. Not stop her, Lyra said slowly. But I can show her where it's safe to go. Give her better pictures to aim for. She's not trying to run away. She's just curious. She wants to explore. She wants to give her father's matching heart attacks, Theron muttered from across the room. He was holding Aurora, who had frozen his left arm solid and was giggling about it. That too, Lyra admitted with a smile. It was strange, Elara thought, how quickly her family had grown. 3 months ago, she'd been a sacrifice in a white dress, walking toward her death. Now she was queen of the Winter Citadel, mate to 3 ancient titans, mother of 3 hybrid children, and sister-in-residence to a baker's daughter who had become the most important person in her babies' lives. Her pack, her family, her everything. And she would kill anyone who tried to take them from her. The message arrived at midnight. A raven, black as the space between stars, carrying a scroll sealed with the emblem of the Ember Court. A dragon eating its own tail. The symbol of Pyrrhus, the Ember King. Kaelan intercepted it in the rookery. He read it once, then twice, then a 3rd time, as if repetition might change the words. It didn't. He brought it to the war room, where Theron and Soren were already waiting. They'd felt his fury through the bond, had known something was wrong before he even descended the stairs. What is it? Theron demanded. Another threat? An army? Worse. Kaelan threw the scroll onto the map table. A summons. The High Council of Courts has called a tribunal. All 4 seasonal courts are required to attend. The subject of discussion is... He couldn't finish the sentence. Soren picked up the scroll. Read it aloud. The matter of the hybrid abominations born to the human vessel of the Winter Court, and the determination of whether said abominations pose an existential threat to the balance of the realms, requiring immediate and permanent neutralization. Silence. Then Theron's fist went through the wall. Neutralization? They want to kill our children? It's a tribunal, Soren said. His voice was calm, but his hands were shaking. They'll hear arguments, make a judgment. Based on what evidence? Elara appeared in the doorway. She was still in her nightgown, silver-streaked hair tangled from sleep, but her eyes were alert, burning with a fury that made the golden light beneath her skin flare. The triplets are 3 months old. They haven't done anything except exist. That's enough, Kaelan said quietly. To them, existence is the crime. The prophecies spoke of hybrids ending the seasons. The other courts have spent millennia interpreting that as destruction. They see our children as weapons, as threats, as monsters. They're babies. Elara's voice cracked. Aurora made her first snowflake yesterday. Kaelan laughed for the first time. Nova figured out how to teleport to Lyra whenever she wants a hug. They're not monsters. They're children. My children. We know. Theron pulled his fist from the wall. Stone dust coated his knuckles. His orange eyes were blazing with protective rage. And we won't let anyone hurt them. Tribunal be damned. If they try to take our children, I'll burn every court in the realm to ash. That would start a war, Soren pointed out. Then it starts a war. Elara's voice cut through the room like a blade. All 3 titans turned to look at her. She stepped forward, the golden light pulsing beneath her skin in rhythm with her racing heart. We don't start a war. We win one. What do you mean? Kaelan asked. I mean, we go to the tribunal. We face them. We show them that our children aren't the monsters they fear. Elara's chin lifted. They've never seen a hybrid before. They don't know what our children are capable of. They're operating on fear and prophecy and 5,000 years of propaganda. So we give them something else. We give them proof. Proof of what? That the prophecy was right. Elara's smile was sharp enough to draw blood. The hybrids will end the seasons. Not through destruction. Through unity. Our children carry the blood of winter and the fire of spring and the storm of summer and the harvest of autumn. They're not a threat to the balance. They are the balance. The next evolution. The bridge between all courts. We show them that. And we don't just survive the tribunal. We change everything. Soren stared at her. You want to use our 3-month-old infants as political leverage? I want to protect our children by proving they're not weapons, Elara corrected. There's a difference. A risky difference, Kaelan said slowly. If we bring them to the tribunal and something goes wrong, if they lose control, if their magic manifests in a way the council interprets as threatening, then we'll be there to manage it, Elara said. All 4 of us. Together. The way we've managed everything else. She looked at each of her mates in turn. I know it's dangerous. I know the odds are against us. But hiding won't save them. Running won't protect them. The only way forward is through. We show the world what our family is, what we can do, what our children represent, and if they still try to hurt them after that? Theron's voice was a growl. Elara's eyes flashed gold. Then we burn them all. The journey to the neutral grounds took 3 days. The tribunal was held in the only place where all 4 seasonal courts had equal standing, a plateau at the center of the realm, where winter's snow met spring's flowers, met summer's sun, met autumn's harvest, a place of impossible geography, maintained by ancient magic that predated the courts themselves. Elara traveled in a carriage enchanted with warming spells and protective wards. The triplets were strapped into specially designed carriers that Soren had spent 2 weeks crafting. Each carrier was keyed to the baby's specific magical signature, dampening their power enough to prevent accidental manifestations. At least, that was the theory. In practice, Aurora had already frozen one wheel solid. Kaelan had set fire to the cushion he didn't like, and Nova had teleported onto the roof of the carriage twice. By the time they reached the neutral grounds, Elara was exhausted, the carriage was half destroyed, and all 3 titans had developed a nervous twitch. Welcome to parenthood, Lyra said cheerfully. She'd insisted on coming, despite the danger. Someone had to wrangle the babies while their parents were busy being politically significant. I thought the war was hard, Theron muttered. The war was easy. The war made sense. I knew who to kill. Please don't kill anyone at the tribunal, Soren said. At least not until after we've made our case. No promises. The neutral grounds were already crowded when they arrived. Representatives from all 4 courts had gathered. The spring court, with their flower-woven banners and their reputation for hedonism. The summer court, with their golden armor and their burning pride. The autumn court, with their harvest masks and their whispered secrets. And at the center of it all, seated on a throne of molten obsidian, was the Ember King himself. Pyrrhus hadn't changed since the siege, still massive, still radiating heat that made the air shimmer, still looking at Elara like she was an insect he couldn't wait to crush. But there was something new in his eyes as he watched the Winter Court's procession approach. Fear. He was afraid of her. Afraid of what she'd become. Afraid of the 3 tiny bundles that Lyra carried in a basket, cooing and grabbing at the colored ribbons someone had tied to the handle. Good, Elara thought. He should be afraid. She stepped down from the ruined carriage, her silver-streaked hair catching the impossible light of the neutral grounds, her white dress billowing in a wind that seemed to follow only her. Behind her, 3 titans emerged. Kaelan in his full ceremonial armor, ice crystals forming in the air around him. Theron in battle leathers, his orange eyes scanning for threats. Soren in scholar's robes, carrying texts that documented every recorded prophecy about hybrids. They moved as one, a pack, a family, a force. The Winter Court has arrived, the herald announced. His voice carried across the plateau with magical amplification, presenting His Majesty Kaelan, King of Winter, his lords Theron and Soren, and Her Majesty Elara, Queen of the Winter Citadel, Mother of the hybrid three, the crowd murmured. Elara felt hundreds of eyes on her. On the basket Lyra carried. On the 3 babies who had no idea that their existence was being judged by beings older than mountains. Let them look, she thought. Let them see. We have nothing to hide. The tribunal began at noon. The Ember King, as the one who had called the council, spoke first. For 5,000 years, the prophecy has been clear. Pyrrhus's voice rolled across the plateau like thunder. When the blood of stars walks in mortal flesh, the seasons will end. We have debated the meaning of these words for millennia. We have prepared for the day when they would come to pass. He gestured toward the Winter Court's delegation. That day is here. The human vessel has birthed 3 hybrid abominations, 3 creatures carrying the combined power of Titan and mortal, 3 beings that could, if left unchecked, destroy the very fabric of our reality. He slammed his fist on the arm of his throne. Flames erupted around him. I call for their immediate destruction. Before they grow stronger, before they learn to use their power, before the prophecy fulfills itself, and we all burn. The crowd reacted. Some nodded in agreement, others whispered among themselves. The representatives of the spring and summer courts exchanged glances that Elara couldn't read, but before anyone else could speak, she stepped forward. May I address the council? Her voice was calm, steady, the voice of a queen who had faced death and come back stronger. Pyrrhus sneered. The human vessel wishes to speak? How quaint. By all means, defend your monsters. It will make their destruction that much more satisfying. Elara smiled. It was not a kind smile. You call them monsters, she said, her voice carrying across the plateau. Abominations, threats. But tell me, Ember King, what do you actually know about them? Pyrrhus's eyes narrowed. I know what the prophecy says. The prophecy says the seasons will end. It says nothing about destruction. It says nothing about death. You've spent 5,000 years assuming the worst interpretation of a handful of words, and now you want to murder 3 infants based on your assumptions. Careful, human. Pyrrhus's voice dropped to a dangerous register. You're speaking to a king. So am I. Elara didn't flinch. I'm speaking to a king who attacked my home, who tried to kill me while I carried these children, who has spent 6 months plotting their deaths because he's too afraid to consider any other possibility. She turned to the rest of the council. You want to know what hybrids are capable of? Let me show you. She looked at Lyra, who nodded and stepped forward. Slowly, carefully, she lifted Aurora from the basket. The firstborn of the triplets looked around with wide, curious eyes. She didn't cry. She didn't fuss. She just observed, taking in the hundreds of faces watching her with a calm that seemed impossible for an infant. This is Aurora, Elara said. She was born first. She led her siblings into the world. And yes, she has power. Winter's power. The power of ice and snow and cold. Aurora cooed. A snowflake formed in the air above her head. Then another. Then a dozen, swirling in a delicate spiral that caught the light. The crowd gasped. But look at what she does with that power, Elara continued. The snowflakes drifted across the plateau. They landed on representatives from each court. Spring's flowers weren't harmed, the snow melted gently against the petals. Summer's warriors weren't frozen, the flakes evaporated before they could even land. Autumn's masked figures caught the snow on their palms, watching it transform into tiny crystals that sparkled like gems. She's not attacking, Elara said. She's greeting. She's saying hello to everyone here, even the ones who want her dead. Pyrrhus's jaw clenched. A pretty trick. It proves nothing. Then let me show you more. Lyra lifted Kaelan from the basket. The boy was less calm than his sister. He squirmed in Lyra's arms, his dark eyes fixed on Pyrrhus with an intensity that made the Ember King shift uncomfortably. This is Kaelan, Elara said. He has fire. Your fire, Pyrrhus. The same flame that you use to attack my home. The same power that you claim makes hybrids dangerous. She nodded at Lyra. Show them. Lyra whispered something to Kaelan. The baby's face scrunched up in concentration, and then he laughed. A pure, joyful infant's laugh that echoed across the silent plateau. Fire bloomed from his tiny hands. Not destructive fire, not the hungry flames that consumed, but warm, golden light that spread across the neutral grounds like sunrise. The representatives of all four courts felt it. The warmth, the comfort, the sense of safety that came from a fire meant to protect, not destroy. Even Pyrrhus felt it, though his face twisted with confusion and denial. He doesn't want to burn anyone, Elara said. He wants to keep people warm. He wants to protect them from the cold. He has the same power as you, Ember King, but where you use it for destruction, he uses it for comfort. Pyrrhus opened his mouth to respond, but Elara wasn't finished. Lyra, she said. Nova, the youngest triplet, was lifted from the basket and immediately disappeared. The crowd erupted into chaos. Guards drew weapons. Magic flared. For one terrible moment, Elara thought everything had gone wrong. Then Nova reappeared, in Pyrrhus's lap. The Ember King froze. Every titan in the plateau froze. The baby sat in the lap of the most powerful fire elemental in existence, looking up at him with curious golden-silver eyes. She teleported, Elara said calmly, though her heart was hammering. She can go anywhere she can imagine. Anywhere in the realm. She's 3 months old and she already has more mobility than any being alive. She looked directly at Pyrrhus. She could have appeared anywhere. Behind your defenses. Inside your treasury. In the heart of your volcano. But she chose you. She wanted to meet you. To see you up close. To understand the man who wants her dead. Pyrrhus stared down at the baby in his lap. Nova reached up with one tiny hand and touched his face. And smiled. The Ember King, ancient, powerful, terrifying, flinched at a baby's smile. Does that look like a monster to you? Elara asked. Does that look like an abomination that needs to be destroyed? She stepped forward, her voice rising. These children are not weapons. They're not threats. They're the future. They carry the blood of all seasons in their veins. They can unite what has been divided for 5,000 years. They're not the end of the seasons. They're the bridge between them. She lifted her chin, her golden eyes blazing. The prophecy was right. The seasons will end. Not in destruction. In unity. Our children will do what we never could. They'll bring peace to the realm. They'll prove that different powers can coexist. That hybrids aren't monsters. They're miracles. She met every eye in the council. You can kill them. You can try. But know this. If you raise a hand against my children, you don't just face the Winter Court. You face me. A mother who walked through death to protect them. Who broke the eternal winter with her own hands? Who stood against your armies and won? Her voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the plateau. And if you think I won't burn this entire realm to protect my family, you haven't been paying attention. Silence. Absolute. Crushing silence. Then, slowly, Nova teleported from Pyrrhus's lap back to Lyra's arms, and laughed. The council deliberated for 3 hours. Elara waited outside the main chamber, surrounded by her pack. Kaelan stood at her right, his hand on her shoulder. Theron paced like a caged beast on her left. Soren sat with Lyra, helping entertain the triplets while their future was decided by beings who had never changed a diaper in their immortal lives. You were magnificent. Kaelan's voice was quiet. Private. Elara leaned into his touch. I was terrified. It didn't show. She laughed weakly. That's the secret, isn't it? Being terrified and doing it anyway. That's what you taught me. That first night, when I walked into the citadel expecting to die, I was so scared I couldn't feel my legs. But I kept walking, and look where it brought you. Kaelan's winter blue eyes softened. Queen of the citadel, mother of 3 miracles, the woman who just told the most powerful beings in the realm that she'd burn them all for her children. Would you? Elara asked. Burn them all. I mean, if they decide. She couldn't finish the sentence. Kaelan's hand tightened on her shoulder. I would freeze this entire plateau solid and never think twice. Theron would raze every court to the ground. Soren would rewrite reality itself if he had to. He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. But it won't come to that. You changed something in there, Elara. I saw their faces. Even Pyrrhus. They expected a weapon. You showed them a family. You showed them love. The doors to the chamber opened. A herald emerged, his face unreadable. The council has reached a decision. The Winter Court is summoned to hear the verdict. Elara stood. Her legs were shaking, but she didn't let it show. She walked into that chamber the way she'd walked into the Citadel all those months ago. Terrified. Determined. Ready to face whatever came next. The council was seated in a semicircle. Pyrrhus at the center, his expression impossible to read. The representatives of spring, summer, and autumn flanking him. And standing before them all, a single figure Elara hadn't seen before. An ancient woman, bent with age, her face hidden behind a veil of stars. The oracle of the neutral grounds, the keeper of prophecies, the one being in the realm whose words could not be ignored. She had asked to speak. The hybrid children, the oracle said, her voice like wind through dead leaves, have been examined. Their power has been measured. Their potential has been assessed. She turned toward Elara. The prophecy spoke of endings, of the blood of stars walking in mortal flesh, of seasons coming to a close. Elara's heart stopped. But prophecies are not commands. They are possibilities. Glimpses of what might be, shaped by the choices of those who live them. The oracle lifted her veiled head. These children carry the potential for destruction, for unity, for change beyond imagining. What they become will depend not on the stars, but on those who raise them, those who love them, those who teach them the difference between power and wisdom. She raised one gnarled hand. The council's verdict is thus: the hybrid children of the Winter Court shall live. They shall be raised under the watchful eye of their parents and the monitoring of this council. If they show signs of the destruction the prophecy warned of, this tribunal will reconvene. But they will not be condemned for crimes they have not committed. They will not be murdered for a future that does not yet exist. Elara's knees buckled. Kaelan caught her before she could fall. They live, he whispered, his voice cracking. Our children live. Across the chamber, Pyrrhus rose from his throne. His face was a mask of barely controlled rage, but he said nothing, because even the Ember King couldn't overrule an oracle. The council was dismissed. The tribunal ended, and Elara walked out of that chamber with her family intact, her children safe, her future uncertain but possible. She held her babies close that night, all three of them piled in the nest with her and her mates, a tangle of limbs and fur and warmth and love. We did it, she murmured, against Aurora's silver hair. We survived. This time, Soren said quietly. His storm-gray eyes were troubled, but the oracle said they'd be watching, waiting. If anything goes wrong, then we deal with it, Theron interrupted. Together, like we always do. Kaelan pulled Elara closer, his arm wrapping around her and the babies. Whatever comes, he said, we face it as a family. That's our strength. That's what they'll never understand. The pack, Elara whispered. The pack? All three titans agreed. Outside, the stars wheeled overhead. The blood of stars, walking in mortal flesh. Three tiny miracles who would reshape the world simply by existing. The mother of monsters closed her eyes and dreamed of the future her children would build. Part 14. The Inheritance. 5 years passed. The triplets grew like wildflowers in a hurricane. Unpredictable. Unstoppable. Magnificent. Aurora, the firstborn, developed her father's control. By age 3, she could create ice sculptures that would have taken master artisans decades to achieve. By 5, she was reading frost patterns and predicting weather weeks in advance. She was quiet, observant, always watching, always learning. She had Kaelan's patience and Elara's determination. A dangerous combination. Kaelan, the only boy, was fire incarnate. He ran everywhere, climbed everything, set approximately 40% of his belongings ablaze and laughed while they burned. He had Theron's battle instincts and his mother's stubbornness. The training masters had given up trying to teach him traditional forms. He invented his own, usually while destroying furniture. And Nova, the youngest, remained the wild card. Her teleportation had grown precise enough that she could appear anywhere she'd ever been. And she had been everywhere. She'd visited all 4 seasonal courts, without permission. She'd explored ruins that hadn't been seen by living eyes in millennia. She'd once teleported into the Ember King's private chambers just to leave him a flower she'd picked from the neutral grounds. Pyrrhus had not been amused, but he hadn't attacked either. The Oracle's verdict had stayed his hand, and something else. Something Elara had seen in his eyes that night when Nova had smiled at him. Doubt. The Ember King was starting to wonder if he'd been wrong. The delegation arrived on a spring morning. Elara was in the garden with the children, teaching them about the roses that still bloomed impossible and golden among the winter snow. Aurora was carefully examining a petal, her blue-gold eyes tracking the magical patterns within. Kaelan was attempting to see if he could make the roses bloom faster with controlled bursts of fire. He could not. The roses were fireproof. Soren had made sure of that after the second incident. Nova was sitting in Elara's lap, braiding a flower crown from petals that teleported into her hands from various parts of the Citadel grounds. "Mama," she said, not looking up from her work. "People are coming." Elara went still. "What kind of people, little star?" "Important ones." Nova frowned in concentration. "They smell like fire and flowers and falling leaves. All the seasons at once. The other courts." Elara stood, lifting Nova onto her hip. "Aurora? Kaelan, come here." The twins obeyed immediately. They'd learned to recognize that tone in their mother's voice. The queen voice. The something is happening voice. Kaelan appeared at the garden gate, frost forming in his hair. He'd felt the same thing Elara had. The shift in the air. The weight of approaching power. "Delegations from all 4 courts," he said. His winter blue eyes were unreadable. "They've come to the Citadel. Together." "Together?" Elara frowned. "That's unprecedented." Kaelan's jaw tightened. "They're requesting an audience. With you. And the children." Elara looked down at her babies. 5 years old and already caught up in political machinations they couldn't understand. Aurora looked up at her with Kaelan's eyes and Elara's steel. "We'll be okay, Mama." She reached out and took her mother's hand. "We're strong. You taught us that." Something cracked in Elara's chest. "Yes," she said softly. "You are." She looked at Kaelan. "We received them. Together. As a family." The throne room of the Winter Citadel had changed over the years. Where once it had been cold and austere, a monument to ancient power, it now held traces of life, of growth, of the family that called it home. Aurora's ice sculptures lined the walls, each one a masterpiece that would last forever in the Citadel's eternal cold. Kaedan's scorch marks decorated the training corner where he practiced his forms. Nova's collected treasures from around the realm sat in a display case that Soren had enchanted to organize itself. It had stopped trying after the 3rd week. It was a throne room. But it was also a home. The delegations entered single file. Spring first, led by a woman with vines growing from her hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Summer next, golden-armored warriors who moved with predatory grace. Autumn last, masked figures who whispered secrets to each other in rustling voices. And at the center of them all, massive and radiating heat that made the ice walls sweat, was Pyrrhus. The Ember King had come himself. Elara sat on her throne, flanked by her mates. Kaelan on her right, Theron on her left, Soren standing behind her shoulder. The triplets sat on smaller thrones below, arranged in order of birth. They looked like a family. They looked like a force. "Winter Court welcomes the seasonal delegation," Elara said, her voice carrying across the hall. "We are surprised by this visit. Tribunals are usually held on neutral grounds. This isn't a tribunal," Pyrrhus said. His voice was different than Elara remembered. Rougher, older. As if the past 5 years had aged him in ways that titans weren't supposed to age. "Then what is it?" "An offer." Pyrrhus stepped forward. "The seasonal courts have been at war, in one form or another, for 5,000 years. We've fought over territory, over resources, over pride and prophecy and ancient grudges that no one remembers the origin of anymore. He looked at the triplets, all three of them, taking in their strange, hybrid features, their eyes that shifted between colors, their power that hummed in the air around them. Your children represent something we never thought possible, a bridge between seasons, a being that carries all of our blood, all of our power, without being destroyed by the contradictions. He met Elara's gaze. We want to propose an alliance. Elara's composure cracked. An alliance? The spring court representative stepped forward. Her vine hair rustled as she moved. The oracle's words have been debated for 5 years. Prophecies analyzed, futures mapped, and we have come to a conclusion. She looked at the triplets with something that might have been wonder. The children will end the seasons, not through destruction, through unification. They are the new era, the proof that different powers can coexist. The question is not whether the old order will fall, it is whether we will fall with it, or rise to meet it. We choose to rise, the summer representative added. His golden armor caught the light. To ally ourselves with the winter court, to be part of what comes next, rather than crushed beneath it. To survive, the autumn representative whispered, her mask shifting to reveal ancient eyes. By adapting, the way the seasons themselves have always adapted. Silence. Elara looked at her mates, at the shock in their faces, at the hope they were too cautious to show. Then she looked at her children. Aurora was watching the delegations with analytical eyes, already calculating political implications. Kaelan was vibrating with barely contained energy, probably hoping this would lead to something he could fight. Nova was staring at Pyrrhus with the same curious intensity she'd had as a baby. Then she teleported into his lap. Again, Pyrrhus flinched. 5 years of practice, and the Ember King still couldn't handle a 5-year-old materializing in his personal space. "You're less scary than the stories," Nova announced. She patted his molten cheek with a hand that should have burned but didn't. "Mama says you tried to hurt us before we were born." "Why?" Pyrrhus stared at her. The entire throne room held its breath. "Because I was afraid," the Ember King said finally. His voice was barely a whisper. "Of what you might become. Of what you might do. Of change." He swallowed. "I was wrong." Nova considered this. Then she nodded solemnly, reached into thin air, and produced a flower. A single bloom from the neutral grounds, where all seasons met. She placed it in Pyrrhus's massive, burning hand. "Mama says when you're wrong, you have to try to be better." The flower should have incinerated instantly, but it didn't. It sat in Pyrrhus's palm, delicate and alive, protected by something stronger than fire, the magic of a child who had never learned to hate. Pyrrhus looked at the flower, then at Nova, then at Elara. "Your daughter is terrifying," he said. Elara smiled. "I know. We accept your alliance." The treaties took a month to negotiate. Soren handled most of the details, his scholar's mind perfectly suited to the intricacies of intercourt diplomacy. Kaelan provided the authority. Theron provided the threat of violence if anyone tried anything underhanded. And Elara provided the vision. A unified realm, all 4 seasonal courts working together for the first time in history, trade routes reopening, borders becoming bridges instead of walls. A future where the next generation wouldn't have to fear the monsters over the mountain because the monsters were family. It wouldn't be easy. 5,000 years of hatred couldn't be erased overnight. There would be setbacks, conflicts, moments when the old fears resurfaced and the alliance threatened to shatter. But it was a start, and the triplets would be there to hold it together. "The children represent all of us," Elara explained during the signing ceremony. "They carry winter's patience, spring's growth, summer's strength, autumn's wisdom. When they come of age, they'll be able to negotiate between courts in ways none of us can. They'll understand all sides, because all sides are part of them." She looked at her children, at the 3 impossible miracles who had somehow become the hope of an entire realm. They won't just end the seasons. They'll transcend them. And through them, so will we all. That night, after the delegations had departed and the treaties had been signed and the citadel had finally gone quiet, Elara sat in the nest with her family. Kaelan held Aurora, showing her the frost patterns on the window and explaining how to read the weather in ice. Theron wrestled with Caden, the two of them tumbling across the firs in a mock battle that left scorch marks on everything. Soren read to Nova from an ancient text, translating the archaic language into stories about heroes and monsters and the spaces between. And Elara watched them all. Her pack, her family, her everything. 5 years ago, she had been a sacrifice in a white dress, walking toward her death. Now she was queen. Mother. Mate. The woman who had changed the world just by surviving it. What are you thinking about, Mama? Nova had teleported into her lap without warning. Again, Elara wrapped her arms around her youngest. About how lucky I am. Nova considered this. Is luck why you're crying? Elara touched her cheek, found tears she hadn't noticed falling. Happy tears, little star. Sometimes people cry when they're happy. That's confusing. Yes. Elara laughed. It is. Nova leaned back against her mother's chest. I like our family, she declared. Even when Caden sets things on fire and Aurora freezes my juice, and Papa Theron is too loud, and Papa Kaelan is too quiet, and Papa Soren uses words I don't understand. Elara kissed the top of her head. I like our family too. Will we be together forever? The question was innocent. Sincere. The way only a child could ask about eternity. Elara looked around the nest. At the 3 titans who had claimed her heart. At the 2 children tumbling across the firs. At the frozen patterns on the window and the scorch marks on the stone and the ancient texts scattered everywhere. Forever is a long time, she said carefully. Things change. People grow. The world shifts in ways we can't predict, Nova prompted. But some things stay constant. Love, family, the bonds that tie us together. She pulled Nova closer. We're pack, little star. That doesn't change. No matter what comes, no matter how the world shifts, we face it together. Always? Always, Elara promised, and she meant it. Part 15. The Naming Day. 10 years had passed since the alliance was signed. The realm had transformed in ways that would have been unthinkable a decade ago. Where once the seasonal courts had guarded their borders with armies and ancient wards, now children played freely across territories that had been battlegrounds for millennia. But some traditions remained. The naming day ceremony was one of them. Every hybrid child born in the unified realm was presented to the council on their first birthday. Not for judgment those dark days were over, but for blessing, for welcome, for recognition that they belonged to all seasons, not just one. Today, there were 12 children to be named. Elara stood at the center of the neutral grounds, wearing a gown that shifted colors with each breath, white to gold to silver to rose, a gift from the Spring Court's weavers, enchanted to represent the unity she had helped forge. Beside her, the triplets stood tall. Aurora, at 15, was already taller than her mother. Her silver hair swept back in the intricate braids of a winter court diplomat in training. She held the ceremonial ice crystal that would bless each child with winter's patience. Caden, at 15, was a wall of muscle and barely contained energy, his dark hair perpetually singed at the edges from his own fire. He held the torch of summer, its flames dancing in colors that shouldn't exist. And Nova, at 15, was somewhere nearby. Probably. She had a habit of teleporting to interesting vantage points during ceremonies, only to appear exactly when she was needed. The first family approached, a spring court mother with flowers in her hair, carrying a baby whose eyes shifted between green and gold. The father was summer court, his golden armor polished to a gleam, his expression a mixture of pride and nervousness. Their child was a hybrid. Like the triplets, like the new generation that was slowly, beautifully, rewriting the rules of the realm. We present our daughter to the unified council, the mother said, her voice carrying across the silent plateau. Born of spring's growth and summer's strength, we ask that she be blessed by all seasons, that she be welcomed as a child of the realm, not of any single court. Elara stepped forward. What name do you give this child? Solara, the father answered. For the light that bridges dawn and noon. Elara smiled. Aurora. The winter blessing, Her eldest daughter approached the family, the ice crystal glowing in her hands. She touched it to the baby's forehead, and frost patterns spread across the infant's skin before melting into warmth. "Winter welcomes Elara," Aurora said formally. "May she know patience and wisdom. Kaelan." The summer blessing. The torch dipped toward the baby, close enough to warm but never burn. The flames shifted, wrapping around the infant in a protective cocoon. "Summer welcomes Elara," Kaelan announced. "May she know strength and courage. Nova." The blessing of... Elara paused. Nova wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. A moment later, the youngest triplet appeared directly beside the baby, having teleported from wherever she'd been watching. She held a crystal flower from some dimension none of them had ever visited, its petals chiming with music that existed beyond sound. "This is from the singing realm," Nova said, matter-of-factly. "The flowers there grow blessings instead of seeds. I thought Elara might like one." She tucked the impossible flower into the baby's blanket. "All realms welcome Elara," Nova said. "May she know wonder and adventure." The crowd murmured in approval. The parents' nervousness had transformed into something closer to awe. This was what the new generation represented. Not just unity between the four seasons, but bridges to worlds beyond. Possibilities that expanded with every child born. 11 more families followed. 11 more hybrids blessed. 11 more names spoken into the fabric of the realm. By the time the ceremony ended, the sun had moved halfway across the sky. "You were brilliant," Kaelan said, appearing at Elara's side. His hand found hers, cold fingers intertwining with warm ones. "All of you." Nova almost gave me a heart attack. Again, Theron's voice was a growl, but there was no real anger in it. He'd long since accepted that his youngest daughter would never do anything the expected way. "The flower was a nice touch," Soren observed. He was examining a petal that Nova had given him, his scholar's eyes tracking magical signatures that defied his 5 millennia of accumulated knowledge. "I've never seen anything like it. The crystalline structure suggests..." "It sings when you're sad," Nova interrupted. She had teleported onto Theron's shoulders at some point, her legs dangling against his chest. "And it glows when you're happy. I thought babies might like that." Elara's heart swelled. Her children, her impossible, magnificent, world-changing children. "Let's go home," she said. Epilogue. The dawn. 20 years later. Elara stood on the balcony of the Winter Citadel, watching the sunrise paint the realm in shades of gold and rose. So much had changed. The seasonal courts had merged into a unified council. The old borders were historical curiosities now, taught in schools as examples of how the world used to be before the hybrids changed everything. Aurora had become a diplomat, her calm presence and analytical mind making her the perfect mediator for intercourt disputes. She had her father's ice and her mother's steel, and she used both to build bridges where others saw only walls. Kaelan had become a guardian, his fire turned to protection instead of destruction. He led the unified realm's peacekeeping force, a coalition of warriors from all seasons who worked together to maintain the hard-won peace. And Nova had become something no one expected. An explorer, a wanderer, a bridge between worlds that no one had known existed. Her teleportation had grown beyond anything Soren's texts had predicted. She could step between dimensions now, visit realms that Titans had only theorized about, bring back knowledge and alliances from places that existed outside the seasonal structure entirely. She had found other hybrids out there, other bridges, other possibilities. The universe was bigger than anyone had imagined, and the daughter of the Winter Citadel was determined to map it all. "You're thinking too hard again." Arms wrapped around Elara from behind. Cold arms, familiar arms. "Kaelan, I'm thinking about our children," she said. "They're not children anymore." Elara leaned back into his embrace. "But they'll always be my babies." Another presence joined them. Warm, this time, smelling of blood orange and battle, and home. Theron. "Soren says breakfast is ready," he rumbled. "Also, Nova sent a message. She found a new realm. Says it's made entirely of crystallized music." "Of course she did." Elara laughed. A third presence. Sage and ozone and ancient knowledge. Soren, the diplomatic delegation from the 5th season arrives tomorrow, he reported. They want to discuss formal relations with the council. The 5th season. Another impossibility that had become reality. A court formed by the first generation of hybrids born after the triplets, children who had grown up in a unified realm and created something entirely new. The world kept changing, growing, evolving, just as the prophecy had promised. Elara turned in Kaelan's arms, facing her 3 mates. 20 years of marriage had aged them slightly. Even titans showed time's passage eventually, but they were still hers. Still the monsters who had become her family. Still the loves of her impossible life. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" Theron asked. "For catching me when I fell. For believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. For building this future together." She reached out, touching each of their faces in turn. "I was a sacrifice in a white dress. Once, walking toward my death. And you turned that death into a life I never could have imagined. We didn't do that," Soren said quietly. "You did. We just helped." "Pack helps pack," Elara said. She smiled. "That's the point." The sun rose higher, flooding the realm with golden light. Somewhere out there, Aurora was negotiating a trade agreement between courts that had been enemies for millennia. Kaelan was training the next generation of peacekeepers, teaching them that strength meant protecting the vulnerable, not dominating them. Nova was stepping between dimensions, carrying the light of the Winter Citadel to worlds that had never seen such a thing. And here, on this balcony, surrounded by the loves of her life, Elara watched the dawn of another day. The seasons had ended. Something new had begun. And the Mother of Miracles, the Queen of the Winter Citadel, the sacrifice who had become a sovereign, smiled at the world her family had built. It was beautiful. It was theirs. Forever.